Full story. Get someone else. The Marine commander and the nurse get someone else, the Marine commander ordered. Until the nurse revealed the unit tattoo he recognized. True story. 2,100 words. There are people in this world who carry their whole life story on their skin, not always in the way they planned. Sometimes it is just a small mark, something they got done years ago, something they almost forgot about, but that small mark ends up saying more than any conversation ever could. This story is about one of those moments. A moment where a tiny tattoo on the inside of a woman's forearm changed everything, including the heart of a man who thought he had nothing left to change. The hospital ward was not a pleasant place. It never really is. The smell hits you first. That sharp, sterile smell that somehow makes everything feel a little colder than it actually is. The lights are always too bright. The floors are always too clean. And the silence is the kind of silence that makes you think too much. This particular ward handled a lot of veterans. Older men, mostly. Men who had spent decades being in charge of something. A unit, a mission, a team. And now found themselves lying in a hospital bed with somebody else making all the decisions. That kind of loss, even if it is temporary, does something to a person. Especially a certain kind of person. Commander Walter Grayson was that kind of person. He was 71 years old, retired, and in the hospital following a procedure on his heart. Not an emergency, not life-threatening, just something that needed to be done. And now he was lying in a bed on the 3rd floor, with an IV in his arm, waiting to go home. The nurses on duty that morning had already heard about him before they even walked into his room. Word travels fast in hospitals. One of the younger staff members had gone in to check his vitals and come back out looking a little flustered. Another had gone in to ask if he needed anything, and had been told, very clearly, that what he needed was to be left alone. By the time the morning shift was half an hour in, most of the floor staff had silently agreed to avoid room 14 for as long as possible. Commander Grayson was not a cruel man. He was not a bad man, but he had spent nearly 3 decades in the United States Marine Corps, and in that time he had built habits that did not leave easily. He liked order. He liked people who knew what they were doing. He liked things done a certain way, at a certain time, without excuses. And right now, lying in that bed, feeling weaker than he had felt in years, he was irritable in the way that strong people get irritable when life forces them to be still. He had already sent away 2 people that morning. One of them had knocked on his door too loudly. The other had smiled in a way that felt forced. Small things. But to a man like him, small things were never really small. At around 9 in the morning, there was a knock on the door. A soft one, but confident. Not hesitant. That already made it different from the others. The nurse who walked in was calm. That was the first thing you noticed about her. She was not rushing. She was not nervous. She came in, looked around the room once like she was taking a quick inventory, and then walked straight to the bedside table and picked up his chart. She was somewhere in her mid-50s, with short natural hair and reading glasses that she had pushed up onto her forehead without thinking about it. Her name tag said, Lieutenant Sandra Okafor, RN. The commander looked at her the way he had looked at the others. He did not say good morning. He did not wait for her to introduce herself. He just said, flatly, I'd rather have someone else. She did not look up from the chart. Your blood pressure was a little high this morning, she said. We are going to keep an eye on that. Did you hear what I said? I heard you. She set the chart down and moved to check the IV line. Your drip needs adjusting. He watched her work. She was efficient. She knew exactly what she was touching and why. No wasted movements. But that was not the point. He said it again, this time more directly. He told her he was not trying to be rude, but he wanted someone with more experience. A senior nurse, preferably a male one, if that was possible. He had nothing against her personally, he said, but he had his preferences, and he would appreciate it if those were respected. She finished adjusting the drip. Then she straightened up and looked at him directly. Not with anger, not with hurt feelings, just with the steady, level look of a person who has been talked to this way before, and decided a long time ago not to let it touch her. I've been a registered nurse for 22 years, she said. Before that, I served 8 years in the Marine Corps. I've worked in 2 combat zones. I have more experience than most of the people on this floor. She paused. But if you still want someone else, I can make that happen. It will just take some time. I've worked in 2 combat zones. I have more experience than most of the people on this floor. She began to note something on the chart. And that is when it happened. She reached forward slightly, and the sleeve of her scrub top shifted up. Just a little. Just enough. On the inside of her left forearm, there was a tattoo. Small, faded at the edges the way old tattoos get, but still perfectly clear. The eagle, globe and anchor, the emblem of the United States Marine Corps, and underneath it, in neat block letters, 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. Commander Grayson stopped mid-breath. He stared at that tattoo. The room felt different suddenly. The beeping of the monitor, the voices somewhere down the hallway, the hum of the building. All of it went quiet in that strange way, where you are still hearing everything, but none of it is reaching you. He stared at those letters. 2 sevens. He knew that number. He knew it the way you know your own birth date, the way you know your mother's voice. He had commanded that battalion. His voice, when it came out, was different from before. Quieter. The sharpness was gone. 2 sevens, he said. Just that. Just the number. Like a question that was also an answer. She looked down at her arm, then back up at him. Yes, she said. Okinawa first, then Fallujah. Fallujah. November 2004. The Second Battle of Fallujah. It was one of the hardest urban combat operations the Marine Corps had been involved in since the Vietnam era. Street by street. Building by building, heavy losses, the kind of fighting that gets inside you and does not leave. Commander Grayson had been there, not on the ground, not in those streets, but he had been the one sitting with the reports. He had been the one signing the letters that went home to families. He had carried the names of the men who did not come back. He still carried them. After all this time, he still carried them. And this woman had been there too, not behind a desk. She had been embedded with that battalion as a combat nurse. She had been in the forward aid stations. She had been the person the wounded saw first. The person who was there in those terrible first minutes, when everything was chaos and blood and noise, and a young man somewhere was wondering if he was going to survive. She had held those hands. She had worked those shifts. She knew what it smelled like, and what it sounded like, and what it felt like, to lose someone you had just spent an hour trying to save. The commander was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "How many deployments?" 2 with the Corps, she said. Okinawa was almost peaceful compared to the second one. She said it simply, without drama. The way veterans talk about hard things, like they are describing weather. He nodded slowly. He asked about the battalion, about the people. He said a few names, carefully, the way you say names that mean something. She remembered some of them. She told him what she could. One name she remembered very well, a young corporal from the Midwest, who had been hit in the shoulder and had made it out. She had not heard anything about him since. The commander told her he had gone on to finish his service, that he was living somewhere in Colorado now, with a family. She listened to that with her eyes a little softer than they had been a moment before. There was a silence after that, a comfortable one, the kind that does not need to be filled. Then the commander asked her something. He asked why she had become a nurse after leaving the Corps. She was quiet for a second. Then she said something that stayed with him for a long time after she left the room. She said, "Over there, I kept losing them no matter how hard I tried. I figured if I came back and did this, maybe I'd get to keep a few more. Over there, I kept losing them no matter how hard I tried. I figured if I came back and did this, maybe I'd get to keep a few more." He did not say anything right away. He just looked at the ceiling for a moment. His jaw was tight, the way it gets when something hits you in a place you were not expecting. Then he looked back at her and nodded. Not a polite nod, a real one. The kind that means, "I understand exactly what you are saying, and I respect it more than I can tell you right now." She finished her checks. She made her notes. She told him his pressure was still a little elevated, but that it should come down by the afternoon. She told him the surgical team would be checking in before lunch. She picked up the clipboard, tucked it under her arm, and turned to leave. Then he spoke. His voice had none of the hardness it had carried when she walked in. "Nurse," he said. She turned. "What I said when you came in." He paused. He was the kind of man who did not apologize often, and when he did, it was not smooth or practiced. It came out in pieces, each word placed carefully, like he was picking them up one at a time. "That was wrong of me. I had no cause for it. You didn't deserve that." She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "People say things when they are scared. It happens." She said it without any trace of bitterness, just as a fact. A true one. I wasn't scared, he said. She smiled at that. A small one. Okay, she said. People say things when they are proud and stuck in a hospital bed then. She held his gaze for a second. It still happens. Something close to a smile crossed his face too. The first one since he had arrived. She told him she would be his nurse for the remainder of his stay. She told him he was going to be fine. Not in a soft, reassuring, trying to make you feel better way. In a steady, I have seen much worse and you are not it way. The way someone talks when they actually know what they are talking about, and they want you to believe it, because it is simply true. He was discharged 3 days later. Before he left, he stopped at the nurse's station. He asked if she was in. She was on a break, they told him. He left a folded note with his name written on the outside, and asked them to give it to her. The staff later said she came back from her break, picked up the note, read it standing right there at the desk. She read it once, then folded it and put it into the pocket of her scrubs. She did not say anything about it. She just went back to her work. Nobody knows what was in that note. Maybe an apology written out properly, the kind he could not quite manage in person. Maybe the name of that corporal from Fallujah, and where he was living now. Maybe just 2 words, something simple, that only someone from 2/7 would fully understand. But for the rest of that week, the nurses who worked alongside her noticed something. She walked a little straighter. She moved through her shifts with just a little more ease, like something that had been sitting quietly on her shoulders for a long time had finally been looked at, acknowledged, and put down. Sometimes that is all any of us really need. Not grand speeches, not a parade, just one person, even someone who started out being difficult, to look at what you carried and say, I see it, I see you, and it matters. A tiny tattoo did that, a faded mark on the inside of a forearm that had been there for over 20 years, waiting, without knowing it was waiting, for exactly this moment.